All right. Hi, Joe. Super excited to welcome you on this episode of Leaders Cut the BS. I'm very excited to host you and to get to know you. So let's jump right into it. I know you're logging in
Okay.
from somewhere in the US. I love, by the way, your background, like painting image looks very cool. And yeah, so just for people who don't know you yet, give a bit of an intro about yourself. Who are you? Who's Joe Ahmad?
well, I'm based in Houston, Texas. I've been a lawyer since, I guess, 1987. Um, Started practicing in Texas in 1989 after a clerkship in Michigan, and did about 4 years working with a law firm, mainly a trial boutique. And then in 1993, a guy, John Zavisanis, that I'd been to law school, went to law school with. We lived together in, I think, second and third year in a house with some other law students. And then we formed our own firm. We were a little crazy. We thought without any clients or without any money, we could make a go of it. Somehow it worked eventually. And now in 2026, we are a trial boutique of our own with approximately, I would say, 65 lawyers.
Wow, that's so impressive. I love the story of how it started and how it's working out today. So super impressive. And so also just a small thing because Joe and Ahmed usually you don't see them coming together the names. So is there like a background story to this?
Well, my real name is Sufi Yusuf Ahmed.
Okay.
So all my credit cards, license, and passports say Sufi Ahmed. Sufi is just a family name, and Yusuf is the name
Okay.
that I go by. But Yusuf means Joseph. Um, when I was born in 1962, I didn't think anybody would have heard of the name Yusuf. Now it turns out, again today, the name is, relatively commonplace. But back then it was, kind of a compromise. My mother's American too, so um, it was easier. But my
That's
dad is
amazing.
Pakistan. Yeah, my father's Pakistani.
Okay, cool. No, because I have people and with me and my team called Yusuf, and we call them Joe all the time. I'm half I'm Egyptian French, so I relate a bit to this. So that's really cool. So for people, who where do you spend most of your time thinking about at work? So for people who don't know you and don't have this perspective.
Well, honestly, it feels like, every waking moment, to be honest. And that's kind of the hard part, when you're doing, you could call us litigation, but we really are more trial focused.
Mm.
In that world, it's kind of hard to, turn it off, right? Um, so I mean, you do get time off. I mean, when we don't have a upcoming trial setting, we tend to take maybe a longer vacation than other people do. But on the other hand, when we're on, for example, when you're in trial, getting ready for trial, it's pretty crazy. But
Mm.
otherwise, it's not like TV. I mean, a lot of our days, especially if it's, again, we're not in trial prep or trial mode, is spent on a computer screen going through emails, right?
Yeah.
Just like everybody else, we get tons of emails, a lot of time on calls, a lot of time on meetings. I tend to, supervise a lot of cases, so I have to kind of go around and, check on various cases. So that can be a more typical day. Now, when you get into trial mode, it's kind of like you're focused on that case. You're kind of holed up, either preparing on your own, but a lot of that time is spent in meetings with the trial team.
Yeah, I hear you. And what's the part of your role that surprises people the most?
Well, Probably the fact that, like I said, I have a standing desk, so I'm standing at my desk going through emails, all the time. I think the other thing, again, I kind of mentioned it, is, you do spend, even when you go home, you're spending a lot of time thinking about the case.
Yeah.
And, for example, I have on my business card my mobile number.
Mm.
So I will tend to get calls, I mean, in trial work, it's not quite like being on call when you're a doctor, but it feels like it.
Yeah, yeah, I feel you. I know what you mean. And I love that you have the standing desk is something I also do. And people are like, it's unique. It's unique. Like half of the time I'm sitting, half of the time I'm standing. And if there's not a standing desk is where I'm working, like I just bring up anything and try to stand. So it's very healthy for the back and the posture and productivity. So that's really cool. If we go a bit inside your workflow, walk us through a normal week for your team. Where do you feel the work tends to pile up? Like you mentioned a bit, there's a trial phase and there's the other phase and there's you and your team. So what does a normal week feel like and where does it tend to pile up?
Well, again, it depends on, whether you're in prep mode or not, right? If you're not, it's really, kind of going around and putting out fires on various cases. In our work, I mean, I guess is the interesting and fun part, but there's always surprises, and every day is a new day. And the end of the day, looks a lot different than the beginning of the day. And so it's very dynamic, and you kind of just have to come, to work like, prepared for anything, because anything can happen. And so, basically spending, like I said, if it's not trial prep mode, I'm going through emails. Okay, somebody, decided to file something. Is it something I need to read? And part of the issue is, figuring out what you need to pay attention to and what you can kind of file away.
Yeah, yeah, I hear you.
And in meetings, I'm always shuffling. Okay, do I need to be at this meeting? We're having a meeting, we're having a call, asking the team, is this something I need to do? Is this something that I really don't need to do? And, so a lot of it is, okay, figuring out the schedule, looking at new things that have, come in, filings, et cetera, and then talking to the team. But, um, I guess one thing that's a little bit different, because I know other law firms, a lot of their lawyers are remote, doesn't really work, the way we operate, right? As I kind of indicated, you kind of need the people in the workspace around you because you're constantly interacting with them.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, that's different. I like that. That's really good. And what's the kind of task that you feel quietly eats up your time or time in general, but no one really questions?
Well, I love if no one questions it, but I mean, reading filings, reading briefs, um, lawyers love to file things, right? They love paper. And, you can spend a lot of time, just sifting through the filings on cases you're handling. And again, sometimes you'll kind of look at the first page and realize you don't need to read it, but there's plenty of times where you do.
Mm-mm.
And so you spend a lot of time, reading. And then when you're in trial prep mode, my gosh, you're reading massive amounts of, you're reading depositions,
Yeah.
you're reading filings in the past. So yeah, there's a lot of that. People don't necessarily see it
Mm.
because, for example, when you go to trial, they just, you just look like, okay, well, he knows the case. Well, you don't see what went into that, which is, long nights and early mornings, just, reading and making sure you're, completely prepared, as prepared as you can be.
Yeah, so you feel like reading and the files is something that eats up a lot of time. Nobody questions it because like what are we gonna question? Like we this is something that's necessary, right? So that's
Yeah.
interesting. when things get busy for you, like you're having a tough, like a very tough week and things are really busy, what do you feel usually breaks first?
Sleep. You know? Um, yeah. You gotta come up with the time somehow. The other thing that goes along with it, unfortunately, I have, 2 kids, and a wife that's been, through it all with me, and, they kinda know, well, I'm not gonna be home, early, or even when I am home, I'm not completely there.
Yeah.
Um, they're not thrilled about that, by the way, but, they're used to it, and now my kids just went off to college, so,
Mm,
it's a little bit different now. But still, that's I think the time with the family, where you're kinda present and
yeah.
then sleep, that's those are the first things to go.
I feel you. I feel you, man. I'm congrats on your kids, first of all. That's definitely a different season for them. But I totally hear you, and it's like a tough balance to balance between you having your proper mental health and energy for work and for the kids. So it's and you're constantly like finding the highest sacrifice to give the win-win to everyone, to be like the highest possible win for everyone. So that's interesting. And so if we dive deeper a bit into you know that, so at some point did you ever consider AI or automation or any type of process improvement as a possible fix to like these long processes, these read filing, this reading, like into your general workflow?
Yeah, I mean, we use AI. You have to be careful, though. I mean, in the US at least, a lot of lawyers who have used it to help them write briefs have gotten into trouble because, AI is not just it's just not there yet.
Mm,
It can be very helpful if managed.
wow.
But for example, you have to check the sites, the case sites that AI spits out. Sometimes it just makes them up. And
Yeah.
then, the judges or probably their clerks, like I was, we would go out and look at the cases, right? And then you find a case that isn't there, lawyer gets in serious trouble for that. But we use it quite a bit. We'll feed in a bunch of documents, and, it can be very helpful to feed in a bunch of depositions and say, is there any testimony regarding this? And it can be very helpful when you're not just using that raw output and
Mm,
giving it to a judge or, even a client. So it can be helpful. I mean, these days, they have, we do focus groups and mock trials to kind of test our trial themes and just see, because jurors, can behave differently than you might expect, especially if you've kind of drank the Kool-Aid on your case. But also, you may not know, you think as a lawyer, you may not know how regular people, will approach the case. And you can feed, kind of like you can create a summary, you know, our side's good points, the other side's good points, and you can
mm,
feed it into an AI model that attempts to replicate your jury in that particular venue.
yeah.
And that, strangely enough, has been some of the most accurate, stuff out there. And it is, that is one of those where, AI can hallucinate on case sites,
Yeah.
but on the kind of jury focus groups, it can be, just unreal in terms of the output that it gives you. It's very helpful.
Wow.
So yeah, we're using it. Like I said, you have to manage it. You it cannot, at least not yet, replace a lawyer, especially in our field, which is trial work. Even with some of the themes that it gives you, and some of the approaches, when we look at the depot summaries, or some of the what we call interrogations that we do to AI when it has a bunch of documents, we ask, okay, certain questions. You'll find it doesn't quite think like a human being yet. Um, but as a trial lawyer, we can spot that and we can kind of,
Yeah.
adjust that.
That's so interesting, Joe. This is a very interesting insight. If it's the first time I'm hearing this, and also if we would dumb it, like break it down in a bit simpler terms for the audience. So when you say it's being used for um the first use case, which is like retrieving cases, like how does this work? Is this like you upload? Because I know like if you use ChatGPT or Claude, you can upload all your files of the case in a project, and then you ask it to retrieve, bring me all the evidence for the party or like whatever, and then it goes
Yeah.
in these files and retrieves the evidence, the testimonies, whatever, and then it
Mhm.
references the file. So what you mean by that is that sometimes it brings up stuff that's even not there. It references a file and something it's not there. So that's one. The second, what you mean in the jury is just like before you get into court, you're kind of role playing, like you know, as the defendant or as the you're role playing a bit how the jury would receive your case and your evidence and your storyline and the emotional side to it, and you're getting feedback a bit by it. So that's the second use case, and that's what you're seeing is working better.
Well, just to be clarifying here, where I think AI is hallucinating is not when you feed a bunch of documents in and ask it questions. At least I haven't seen that. Um, but where it really hallucinates, or there's a potential danger is if you were to go on ChatGPT or Claude or whatever, and put in a particular legal issue, right, and ask, okay, in, this state, you know, what is the law here?
Mm,
Um, it is not always accurate. And
yeah,
then we take that, we're not feeding it in. They're just using their vast knowledge of all cases, supposedly. And if you use that and just, or say, write me a brief, I am trying to argue a certain legal proposition, it will write you a brief.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
But if you take that and just use it as a shortcut and don't actually check what it's saying
yeah.
by reading the actual cases, you can give that to a court and it is wrong.
Mm,
And that's where you get into problems. I find that when you're actually inputting, for example, the documents itself, first of all, that's obviously a smaller body of documents.
yeah,
Then it doesn't hallucinate much. The real problem is it doesn't quite think the way you want it to
yeah,
sometimes. But
yeah.
that can be fixed. Again, you need to manage it. You need to spend some time thinking about it.
Yeah, prompt engineering.
Um,
You want to put Joe Ahmad's like 30 plus years of experience in like somewhere, like all the cases you've defended, and try to like train it. But I get what you mean now. It makes more sense. And there was this other case in Spain where the same issue was like the law of the states and the law of the country. It's like it will not really extract or get the most updated or really say this accurate. So you need to double check. But yeah, this is way clearer now. Thanks for clarifying this. So this is great. And Joe, if what did you try and what did really work the way what sorry, what didn't really work the way you hoped? So you feel is the first side that you wanted to make things more efficient, but it didn't work as you hoped?
well, sometimes, for example, you can again feed all your case materials in. You can say, hey, write me a cross examination of this witness. I'm getting ready to do, cross examination in, couple weeks or whenever, or I'm getting ready to take somebody's deposition, which, is basically getting testimony from a witness, but pretrial, and it will write you a cross examination.
Yeah.
And if you don't know better, you may just use that, kind of without adjustments. And, sometimes I look at it and I find that it's not particularly good. Again, it thinks still like, a robot. It doesn't, it's really not, and it depends. Sometimes it's more helpful than others, but sometimes it just spits out, a cross examination, a direct examination. It can do an opening statement, a closing argument, etc.
Yeah.
But it's not really compelling to your average person, i.e. a jury.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, great. And you know, looking back, what do you think was missing when you actually tried to fix this?
Well, again, it was just, it doesn't think like a human being.
Yeah,
And so it is making technical points. And that's, one of the, the big issues with being a trial lawyer, right? Is it is different than being a litigator who doesn't try cases, right? Because then you're arguing to a court. That is a different way of thinking completely.
yeah. You mean it's
And
more an emotional and more like a societal like value system or storytelling that's yeah, that's different.
all of that.
Yeah,
But I mean, I don't think, I mean, if you think about it, I think you'll come to the realization that people don't always think logically.
yeah,
And it's not always just a matter of intelligence.
yeah,
A lot of smart people don't think logically.
yeah, yeah.
And the
Gut
reality
feeling.
is,
They choose by gut feeling. Most CEOs make their toughest decision with gut, like how they.
yeah, I mean, but there's a lot of complexity. I mean, human beings and their decision making is some of the most complex stuff is out there. I mean, we think AI is complex. Well, they're not there yet. Okay, it is too complicated for them as of now, and I don't know that they'll ever, get there.
Yeah.
Um, maybe, but not in the foreseeable future. And
Wow.
so that's really the problem is it is making technical points
Mm.
that hopefully any good trial lawyer could look at and say, okay, that's not gonna, as we would say in Texas, that dog won't hunt. Meaning that argument isn't gonna work.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Wow, I love it. That dog won't hunt. I love that.
We've got a
So
bunch of them.
please do share more. There's a bit more on that. So if one process ran notice if this process ran smoother for you, what do you think that would free up you or and your team to do? Like to do more, or how would that look like for you?
Well, first of all, I would love an AI tool, and it may be coming, which would sort my emails and summarize what I need to know, in so that I could spend an hour or less every day instead of like
Yeah,
5 6 hours constantly checking emails every day. Um, but I think as we get to a point where AI starts to think more like a human being,
mm,
um, I think it will be more helpful. Again, you're always going to have to make adjustments.
yeah,
But I do think, I mean, look, I think it's obviously going to improve. And the funny thing is, like I said, on the focus group,
yeah,
it seems to be way ahead of some
yeah,
of the other tools in terms of, some of the output.
yeah,
And, so it clearly has the potential.
yeah,
Um, but it's very, very hard to do for, any, you know, yeah, anything that's not a human being. And frankly, it's really hard for a lot of human beings. I mean, lawyers coming out of law school can't do it, most of
yeah.
them.
Yeah, I hear you. So it sounds like this email thing, at least an hour a day for you, for your team of like you have 60 people. Maybe it could be an hour a day for them, but maybe also if that AI was trained to have not to have all your cases, everything you've done for 30 years inside there with the emotional side, with mapping the like the whole shebang. It has everything that you guys done already. It could actually potentially do that 1 or 2 hours per day for you and the whole team. If that's like if you had a magic wand and that would work, how would you feel?
Well, I mean, if it could accurately summarize it, that would be great. I mean, you have to keep in mind, I mean, we don't, I mean, the whole firm, we're all kind of working on different cases. Now, we may have teams of, two, three, four, five, six or more in rare cases. but they're all working on the different cases and they're all getting a ton of emails too. If we could find a system that would summarize it for each and every person, that would be great. But again, there's a lot of judgment and, kind of human decision making discretion in terms of, okay, what do I do with this email? That so far is kind of out of reach. I hope it's coming, but we're all paranoid that we're going to miss something, in an email or in a brief somewhere. So, the notion of kind of turning that over and trusting the process, I suspect will be difficult, at least for a while.
Yeah, I hear you. All right, so we're approaching the end section here, Joe. So thinking about everything you've seen, is there a specific workflow, habit, or meeting where leaders should honestly just cut the BS because it looks productive but really isn't?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think there are constraints that make that difficult, right? I think the problem is we're trying to impress people rather than do a good job.
Yeah,
Um, if you're in a big firm, um, sometimes we, don't take risky decisions because we're afraid if it goes wrong, we'll look bad.
yeah,
Especially if it's unorthodox. So we kind of do things the way they've always been done because no one can question them, even if they're wrong. And the same thing, with clients. A lot of times, you have to impress the client, even though it's not right for their case, right? I mean, there's an old saying of, a lawyer was in trial and the client told the lawyer to ask a question. The lawyer did. It was a terrible question, ruined the case. They lost,
yeah, yeah,
and you got to remember, for example, in a case, your audience is either, typically the judge
yeah,
or the jury.
yeah,
And, impressing the client, if you have, or your firm, or anybody else is not there. But unfortunately, as a daily matter,
yeah,
we're trying to deal with various constituencies that I think prevent us from doing a good job. I mean, AI is a good example of that. I mean, clients want to know, are
mm,
you using AI? That we've heard all this stuff about AI. Are you doing this? Are you doing that? And well, the answer is yes, because it can be helpful. But a lot of times we're trying to impress clients with our technological prowess when some of it's actually not productive,
yeah, yeah,
because again, like I said, lawyers have gotten in trouble because they over rely on it.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
And so, I think that's the biggest challenge, at least for what I'm doing in the legal profession, and specifically in litigation and in trials, is kind of focusing on, you know, what you're really trying to do as opposed to impress all these other constituencies. Am I trying to look good on LinkedIn? Am I trying to make a splash? Am I trying to impress
yeah,
clients? Am I trying to impress other lawyers? And a lot of times you just can't do that when
yeah,
you're trying to just win the damn case, you
yeah,
know? And that should be the focus. And there was a famous owner of a US football team years ago, and he, and this expressionist become famous. He was, I think, talking to his coach and saying, "We're going to do this, we're going to do that," and he just said, "Just win, baby,
yeah.
just win." And sometimes I think you just need to focus on what it takes to win,
Wow,
and not pay attention to all this other noise. But
nice.
unfortunately, I think a lot of people get bogged down in trying to uh, tailor their what they're doing to other audiences, and it really impairs them, I think.
Wow, Joe, that's so inspiring. I think that we're gonna coach you on this, like win, baby. Like keep focusing on the win. I love that. So, if you would give one piece of advice to leaders, what would you want to? What are your
Well, I
thoughts?
I hope good leaders know this, but in my job, and I think for every leader, you are always learning.
Yeah,
Always learning, and when I was young, I used to think, oh, well, great. When I graduate, you know, law school or I'm, done with schooling, I'll know it all. And, I'm done learning. Well, wrong. I mean, you're just actually beginning.
Yeah.
And the whole profession, you say, could I feed in 30 years of materials? And I was, my reaction, I was thinking, I mean, a lot of those early years weren't that good. Okay. Because I was learning and I'm still learning. And, I'm not there yet, and I'll never be
Wow.
completely there.
Wow.
And then new things come along when you think you've figured it out, like AI, but it's going to come, I mean, look, when I graduated law school, I mean, no one had, cell phones,
Yeah.
right?
Wow.
Um, Certainly didn't have iPhones. That came around for the first time in, I think, 2007.
Yeah.
So everything changes and you are constantly learning, which in essence, meaning you're in some sense, it's very difficult to turn it off. But one area you can never turn off is your, learning process.
Wow. Thank you, Joe. Like change is the only constant. Keep focusing on the goal. I love what you said today. This is so inspiring. You're so humble and so focused. I love that. I really find it super inspiring. Thank you so much for this amazing podcast. I really enjoyed getting to know you. I think the audience will too. And super, super, super inspiring getting to know you. Thanks again. I hope we have another session at some point. But yeah, this will
Love
conclude
to.
the podcast. And thanks again. God, have a nice day and hope to catch up soon.
Thank
Thank
you,
you, Joe.
Mark. Really appreciate you having me.
Cheers, Joe. I'm
Bye.
gonna start.